If you're thinking about moving to Branson, one of the first questions you probably have is, what does it actually cost to live here? And that answer really depends on how you live, whether that's full-time, a lake property, maybe you're downsizing, or even as an investment. Hey, welcome back, everybody. My name is Jason Yeager with Great Branson Homes. I help people relocate to Branson, buy lake homes, and invest in short-term rentals around Table Rock Lake. So if that is something you're into, I hope you'll consider subscribing. Now, if you are actually seriously considering relocating to Branson, I also want to let you know that I have an all-new Branson relocation guide for 2026 that I put together for you. It's got lots of great information on the area, from schools, taxes, investment breakdowns, neighborhoods, all kinds of things. So you definitely want to check that out. The link's down in the description below. And if you have a ton of other questions that maybe I didn't answer in the relocation guide, I'm happy to jump on a Zoom for you. You can get on my Calendly link and book a call with me. And that link is also down in the description. All right. Now back to the video. All right, so let's get right into it. I think the first biggest, cost of living for just about anybody is obviously housing. And here in Branson, the cost of living the median price for a single family residential sales here in the city of Branson is probably going to be averaging somewhere in the $260,000 range. And that's down just a little bit from actually this time last year. But if you split that up, because, just as residential in general, there's lots of different kinds of property types within that. But if you're looking at single family homes and you split that away, because we do have a lot of condo inventory here as well. But if you split the single family homes out of that, the median list price for single family homes is going to be in the mid 400s. And, the median sales price is actually just slightly below that. And then when you're talking about condominiums, you could probably get a decent 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. There's a dime a dozen actually around here. And actually right now in our market, in January of 26 or February of 2026, the condo market right now is completely saturated. If you're in the market for a condo, if you're a buyer, you have a lot of choices. There's a lot of nightly rental inventory that is on the market. But for sure, if you're just looking for a nice second home to maybe downsize into, condos would be an awesome a time to be able to get a good deal on one, because there's just so many for sale. The average 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo is probably going to be in your mid to low 200s. You can get a really nice one for just under 300,000, but the average one is probably going to be somewhere around 225, 235, somewhere around there. If you're considering buying a lake property, now the price ranges are going to vastly differ depending on location to the lake, your views. If you're waterfront and you're in like really close to Branson, and those are really much harder to find, then those are going to carry much more of a premium than, say, if you were to buy a waterfront home down in Kimberling City, or even further down south, like into Lampe and Shell Knob. The further away you get from Branson, the lake property real estate values really start to tear down. So you can get a lot more house, a lot more bang for your buck if you're wanting to get a little further out, like 30, 45 minutes from Branson. All right, next up is going to be the property taxes here in the Branson area, and just in Missouri in general. Our property taxes are considerably lower than many, many other areas in the United States. Now, you ask the locals around here, and they're going to complain all day long in the Facebook forums every day about property taxes and personal property taxes, because that is a thing. I came from Texas. So we didn't have any income tax and we didn't have any personal property tax. Those were two new things that I was not really prepared for. So just keep that in mind depending on what state you're from. Maybe you're used to paying that, but you can tell. I'll show you just kind of an example of this one on Cottonwood that I found just as an example. And I'll pull up the property taxes for this one. And this is a $800,000 home, right? The average price for the taxes is going to be just a little over $2,000 a year. It's like 20, I can't remember exactly. Yeah, so this one here on 109 Cottonwood Circle, you can see, look, the taxes are only 26.81 and 31 cents. Now, might be high depending on where you're from, but for most people, that's going to be relatively cheap compared to most areas in the United States. And again, this is a $900,000 lake house that we're talking about. All right. Personal property tax, I know, is something that, maybe you're completely puzzled about. So yes, I mean, if you have anything with an axle, let's just say, or a motor, you're going to get a personal property tax bill. So your cars, your boats, your trailers, your motorcycles, all of that stuff gets personal property tax. And it's honestly, I mean, unless you own all of those things, RVs and things, then that can start stacking up too. If you got all the toys, then you might have another, $2,000 tax bill on the personal property side. So just keep that in mind. I mean, my wife and I, we just have two vehicles and that's it. And I think it's like less than $300 a year that we pay for personal property tax, and combined with our real estate taxes are somewhere around like the $2,400 range for the year. That's much cheaper than, say, $10,000 a year for just your real estate taxes in many other states on average, depending on what state you're in. All right, that leads me into my next point, which is the utilities and expenses that you're going to incur living here. Now, there's been a big uproar in Branson about Liberty increasing their rates. And that's, been very, very recently. So whereas again, this is February of 26. If you're watching this, on down the road, we'll see how these things pan out. But I know a lot of the locals are really kind of starting to get hit hard with electric. Electric bills are going to be your biggest, I think, monthly expense. The water bills. I mean, when I first moved here, my water bill with the city of Branson was like less than $30 a month, but that's gone up over 20 something years. If you're in a co-op, yeah, I mean, you're probably looking at $120 sometimes a month for just your water. And if you're on a well, obviously that's going to be a huge break for you. And even on your electric, everything's mostly all electric. Like natural gas is not a thing down here on Stone and Taney County. Everything's either propane or it's electric. All of our ACs run. I mean, we stay pretty warm all the way through September and even October a lot of times. So that's when you'll start shifting your heat on, is probably in late October into November. And then you'll get that big spike during January and February, trying to keep your home heated when we get a couple of weeks where it does get, at zero or below zero. And so you'll need a heat pump. You'll see a lot of the homes around here have heat pumps. And that just really can end up making your electric utilities push pretty hard. But I'd say for a regular 3-bed, 2-bath house, your electric bill is probably on average going to run you somewhere between $250 and $300 a month. If you're in a condo, then that could probably be more closer to the 180 to 225 a month. And again, if you're not even living here full time, then your utilities will be a much cheaper. Your cable and internet might run you somewhere in the $100 range, depending on your package and your speed that you want to get. There's not a lot of fiber optic. It's not, I mean, that's coming. It's getting more pervasive throughout the areas, but that's more like Springfield, Nixa, Ozark, Republic area up there in Christian and Greene County. Fiber optic is much more prevalent. But down here, there's still a lot of rural areas, and so you will see like broadband or even Starlink, has been a great option for a lot of rural uh, residents down further southwest of the lake. Down there, I know that's been a huge benefit for people. Now, the cost for Starlink can vary depending on what kind of package that you get, but I would be budgeting somewhere in the $100 range for internet and cable. Um, like I said, water could probably run you somewhere in that $100 range as well a month, and then your electric would be somewhere in that 250 to $300 range. And if you have a much larger home, then at least hopefully it's like dual zoned. If you've got over 3,000 square feet, that will definitely play into your monthly expenses. That could probably get up closer to the $400 range for heating, electrically there. So just keep that in mind. And one thing I forgot to mention is that sometimes your COAs for your condo owners association, if you're going to be considering living in a condo, sometimes your condo owners association includes water, sewer, and even cable and internet. Oftentimes they'll usually have a package deal with like Optimum, where you can get a much lower rate because the entire subdivision is got an account with them, and then you pay your association, and then they pay the bill for you, but they get the better rate because there's so many people on like a corporate account basically. So you might check into that too and ask, if your HOA and COA dues cover your utilities. All right. Now, I'm no insurance agent, obviously, but I could tell you from working with buyers that the cost of insurance premiums is definitely something that you don't want to overlook, because depending on the property type, your insurance can vary more than I think people expect. For a typical single family home here in Branson, insurance is very reasonable compared to some other, higher risk coastal markets. We're not coastal. We don't have a lot of hurricanes at all. There's no wildfires or anything like that that go on here. Um, Tornadoes and storms are more common coming from Oklahoma. That whole jet stream system that really carries across Oklahoma will hit us. Table Rock Lake is, I talked about this in one of my other videos. Table Rock Lake and all of the hills around here kind of tend to act as a natural deterrent for most of the systems. But we will get a lot of rain and hail, and so your roofs will take a beating here. And so just looking at those, if you have a home that is got an older roof, then those insurance premiums are going to hit you a lot harder. Starting to see a lot of people when they're shopping rates now that insurance carriers aren't offering the $1,000 deductible with like a standard premium anymore. I mean, you're probably having to opt in for a much higher premium in order to get that $1,000 deductible, like what we've always been used to seeing. Now it's starting to get to like 5% of the home value, or something ridiculous. So you just really want to dig in during those first 10 days when you're under contract to really shop your rates. Now, lake properties can be structured a little differently, depending on location to the lake. If you're really sloped and you have a higher, risk being built up on a hillside, which is not, uncommon. The sloped terrain exposure can affect your premiums, whether or not you have a dock. Most of the time, though, your dock master will have a master insurance premium that everybody just kind of chips in with your dock dues. But you might have a higher rebuild cost if you've got a custom home. Now, if you're buying a short-term rental, that's a different type of policy altogether. Now, this is not a standard homeowner policy. You will have liability considerations that are going to be in there. Sometimes higher premiums, and there's carrier limitations. Not everybody has a great short-term rental package, but if that is something that you are considering, once you get to that point, holler at me. I've got quite a few great partners that I can connect you with that I know for a fact can give you a competitive quote. Now, where I think a lot of people get surprised is when they're factoring in their mortgage payment, they're sometimes not factoring in taxes and insurance. And that's a few extra $100 that can really take people by surprise beyond their original comfort level. So when you're factoring in the cost of moving to Branson, don't just consider the purchase price. Just make sure that you're factoring in realistic insurance numbers depending on the type of property that you're buying. All right, on the everyday grocery cost, I'd say Branson is about middle of the road. It's very comparable to what you'd probably see in other places in the Midwest. Your typical staple items like eggs, milk, chicken, produce, all of those things are going to be a little bit below the national average. Now, if you're dining out, that's probably going to be, it's going to feel a little bit more than maybe what you're used to, just because we are a tourist town. And so depending on where you eat, especially if you're like down at the Landing or any other place that's like on the strip, in the entertainment district, you're probably looking at, I'd say $45-50 for a couple to eat out on average. Whereas, going to McDonald's might run you $9 to $10 a person. One thing that people I think don't realize in Missouri is that they do have a grocery tax. It's like 1.2% or something. And that's in addition to, the sales tax down at the Landing. They have their own sales tax. It's a little bit higher. I think it's close to like almost 10% down there. So if you're buying anything down there, just watch out. So it's not huge, but it's worth noting so that you can make allowances for your day-to-day expenses. And, transportation costs are very reasonable as well. Most people do have a car. There's not a lot of public transit in Branson. As far as like Uber and all that stuff, it's around, but it's not as prevalent as maybe if you're coming from a metro area where you're going to get Uber all the time. Probably not here. Gas prices. So yeah, that goes to the tourism side too, especially during the peak season when people are driving in to Branson. They're going to get all the tourists on their way out of town. All those gas stations right off 65. They're going to have much higher prices than if you're just 20 minutes up north. If you can um, fill up in Ozark, not that anybody would ever really do that, 20 minutes up the highway, or drive your car up there just to get a cheaper gas price. But gas prices are historically cheaper up there away from Branson because they know that they're trying to cater to all of the tourists that are leaving to go home every week. Branson West, little key secret, Branson West, the gas stations out there are almost always 20, sometimes 30 cents cheaper a gallon than in town in Branson. So, and that would not be a very far drive at all, depending on where you live. But I've always managed to get really good prices at the one right in Branson West at 76 and 13 over there. And even the one outside of Stonebridge, that one has always been a lot cheaper than what I've ever found in town. So I try to avoid filling up inside of Branson whenever I can. Okay, here's where some local knowledge is really going to matter. So for sure, and I've talked about this in other videos too, the terrain is going to make a big difference, especially on your maintenance and upkeep. There are hidden costs that people maybe don't really take into consideration until they've already gotten here. So, things like steep driveways, because we get so much rain, the rain runoff down from the road, down your drive to your home can cause a lot of issues if you're not budgeting for regular maintenance, putting in proper French drains, sometimes where needed, gutter guards, just extending your gutters or burying your gutters to be able to divert water appropriately away from the house. Um, if you don't have a paved driveway and it's on a pretty steep hill, then gravel is oftentimes the next option that you see on, and then you're having to constantly be filling your gravel, especially in the spring when we're getting those big rains that come in and just wash everything out. But sometimes your HOA will be able to help out with road maintenance if depending on how it's set up. So you want to dig in there. And while I'm thinking about that, like budgeting for the HOA, there's other hidden costs that the HOA might hit you up for some unexpected costs if you're not really digging in and finding out um, what's your budget this year? Is it going to be? Are you anticipating to have to replace all the siding on all the condo buildings? And do we have enough money to do that, or were you expecting a special assessment that might be coming down the pipe that maybe they talked about in a previous recent meeting? So those are important questions to ask when you're doing your due diligence during your inspection period, to be able to find some of those hidden costs that come up later, right after you've moved in. And then lastly, decks and wood siding, especially on like exteriors of lake properties that are close to the lake. Our humidity down here is going to put a beating on your decks and your siding. And so you definitely want to make sure that you're appropriately maintaining, probably more often than you would normally on waterfront properties, and most especially like wood uh, treated lumber on wood decks. And a lot of people will switch to composite decking in order to avoid having to do that much maintenance, which is a whole other expense in and of itself. So just some things that I've always kind of noticed over my years of being in real estate, with lake properties and waterfront homes. Um, that that's going to be a big factor for you. If you A lot of people like those decks, but they don't really like the idea of having to really properly maintain those decks. And if you don't, then it can cost you on the end when you go to sell. Honestly, oftentimes people won't pay the premium for a beautiful lake home with a wraparound deck that has not been maintained in 30 years. They're factoring in that cost on when they make their offer. So just keep that in mind. All right, Branson can feel pretty affordable, especially if you're coming from maybe a higher cost state, or if you're a downsizer or a remote worker. Your dollar is going to stretch out a lot further here. So what does it really cost to move to Branson? I'd say, for the most part, it's a lot more affordable than maybe what a lot of people anticipated, but it depends on your lifestyle. All right. Again, if you are serious about relocating to Branson, make sure you check out our Branson Relocation Guide. It's in the link down in the comments. And I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who's been supporting the YouTube channel. I hope you're enjoying this Moving to Branson playlist series that we've been putting together. I'm Jason with Great Branson Homes. Follow for the local truth and not the hype.